Load like many of the actual.
Okay, can I have your attention, please? First of all, thank you for your patience. We appreciate it. And now the next point on the agenda is the report on the HW trip. The floor is yours. And thank you all for coming.
Dan, can you bring it up on the screen?
Yep.
All right, I'll start. Okay, first I'll just speak briefly because when we actually got to watch the House in session, and at some points when the congressmen speak, they reserve their time for the people after them because they don't use up the time. So I'm going to reserve my time for my students here, and I'll real quickly just want to thank you. First of all, thank you so much for your sponsoring of our trip and your patience, and Leah helping us with everything, and it worked out great. So everything was wonderful. The bus just made it so much better than it would have been. I just can't quite explain. It was being able to jump in and out of a bus really does make a difference when you're in a city and you don't want to park. So we'd just say, we'll get out here, and he would pull over, park it, we'd get out and walk around, and I'd text him and he'd find out. And what's his name? Mark. Everybody knows Mark, so it's going to be part of the thing. So secondly was I want to talk about the presentation itself, and I wanted to point out that I said we need to do a presentation, you had asked, and they finished their exams, and I said go for it. And I really didn't know what they were doing, and I was kind of not paying attention. But in the meantime, I said, well, can I watch what you're doing? And they're like, of course, you idiot. Like, come bring it up. And so I bring it up, and I watched them put this together on the Google tools. And I just want to point out how great it was, how collaborative it was. They all have responsibilities. I could watch them doing it. And the one thing, too, is, wouldn't it be nice if they all had their own computer? And I think that we should consider that. I know it's a financial thing, but if all of our students had access to these kind of computers where they spent 10 minutes a day waiting for it to kind of get started.
Just interrupt for a second. That's coming this coming year.
Beautiful. I mean, it just would make all the difference. And when they had good ones, it was better. And when they had bad ones, it wasn't so good, And when they were really working on it, and you don't want to make them wait ever, I don't think, right? Waiting is a bad thing. 10, 20. I thought about, too, when they were waiting, is they should have gotten out pencils and paper while they're waiting for the computer to set. Okay, so I'm going to finish there, and I'm going to let them begin. As soon as they found this, you'll watch what they did here, and I am going to sit and watch. And they know what to do.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the board, administrators. Although I was not able
Can I
to...
just interrupt just a second? There's a switch behind you on the wall. Can you turn the lights off over the, there, perfect, thank you. Just so we can see the show that.
Oh, okay.
Although I was not able to accompany my class on this trip, I did help in some ways trying to prepare and choose dates and other things for the trip. And this is our class's presentation on our trip to Washington, D.C., Mr. Smith's AP Government class for the year of 2017 to 2018. Next slide, please, Mr. Smith. The preparation for the trip, as some of you may know, was kind of filled with obstacles, and school vans were being used, which we originally were going to use. Costs were high, and sports scheduled clash. In my case, that was the reason I was not able to attend the trip. The weather conditions were terrible, as you know, as our first original date for the trip was scheduled and then had to be canceled due to the closing of the New York State Thruway. And yet, we persisted. Next slide, please. We took 28 passengers to Washington, D.C. Mark, the bus driver that took my friends along on the ride, safely drove the 7 hours to the destination, and as Mr. Smith said, was able to pull off to the side, let them off, and enjoy the entirety of Washington, D.C. While the bus ride was not the most exciting, they managed to bond over the movies and snacks that were on the bus. Next slide, please. Sorry.
Okay, so this is the
AJ
hotel.
didn't even go.
Yeah, that's great. He probably speaks better than all of us. Anyway, we stayed at a Red Roof Inn hotel to minimize costs. So, I mean, it was a Red Roof Inn Plus, so that was really and this is the exact room that we stayed in. They were pretty small beds, but we got real close on this trip. So yeah, especially with aunts in the room and waking up to ants in my suitcase. That was a good show. But Mr. Smith taught us a lesson and said if we were unhappy with something, we were to talk to the people in charge, and we got a little bit of cash back, so that was pretty good. Saved a bit of money by having ants in the room. So, yeah, but we bonded in the rooms, we brought video games to bond. The boys
the
did.
boys did.
They ordered
Girls
pizza, they had a
actually
party.
Yeah, our rooms are great. No, yeah, it was awesome. Really good.
Yep. Yeah, the guys' room was good, the girls' room not so much. Yeah, Yolanda was helpful, sort of. She brought half the amount of towels needed, so really good. So, next slide, please. Day 1. All right, next slide. We had a breakfast at Denny's. Don't worry. We had a breakfast at Denny's, which was good. Some of our stomachs hurt, but we pushed through the day and onto the Capitol tour.
Yeah, so the Capitol was our first stop of the day. It was beautiful there, a lot better than probably if we went before, because this was cherry blossom season, and the weather was in the 80s, so that was a big change from 30 degrees here. So first off, we got there and we met Philippa, who was Mr. Smith talked to beforehand, and we got led through the whole of the Capitol by the intern there. And we saw a ton of cool things, like we saw a remake of the Magna Carta, which was made out of all gold. Yeah. And while we were walking around the outside of the Capitol and just looking at all the buildings of government, I said to Mr. Smith, it's nice to be able to see these in person than just in the textbook. He's like, right you are, Ross. And then we ended up going to Union Station for lunch, which had a ton of options for all of our food needs. Next slide.
I just want to mention though that our tour guide was, Mr. Smith was actually, I think, our tour guide. Our tour guide was listening to his, he liked some of the things he was saying. He was going to use it on his next tour.
They're right there.
Yeah, Mr. Smith being
Oh, there he
tour guide
is
for the
talking,
tour
yeah.
guide.
And there's our actual tour guide.
I'm telling him that George Washington is supposed to be buried in the crypt there, but there was this special will that he's buried in Mount Vernon, and I told him we're gonna see where he's really buried tomorrow. So,
We even
there's an empty
saw,
hole.
we even saw a protest outside of the Capitol.
Yeah, that's the middle bottom photo.
What were they protesting?
I think racist politicians. Given
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright.
Next slide.
Next
please.
slide.
I think they were Puerto Ricans.
Some more pictures.
Cherry blossoms are still out.
Yeah, they were so
Yeah.
beautiful.
It was about half of my pictures personally were just cherry blossoms, so
My pictures were cherry blossoms and architecture, like, walking around the Capitol building, like, the previous slide I had that, where the crypt was, I was just kind of looking at all the neat parts of the ceiling and stuff, like, I was just kind of nerding out over that myself, so.
next slide. Yep, there's some more.
Next slide.
Alright. So, from Union Station, we went to the museum, which actually is not a Smithsonian museum, so we had to pay a bit of a fee, but personally it was my favorite place to go. So the museum shows like the evolution of the media, so we got to see the first newspapers, printing presses, all the way to television and radio and stuff like that. So some highlights included the Pulitzer Prizes in the 1968 exhibit. So in the 1968 exhibit, it was kind of a bad year for America, to say the least. So Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, MLK was assassinated, there was the Vietnam Tet offensive. And then actually my favorite part was the Pulitzer Prizes, which it was really heart-wrenching actually kind of seeing some of the photos, and it really brought to light like different, like what's going on in the world, and kind of, I think it was more enlightening, I guess, than like just reading a newspaper as opposed to actually seeing it in a picture. And I think it was interesting to see like the difference between actually looking at it and just reading about it. Yeah. Next slide.
That's a terrible picture, man.
Yeah.
That's awful.
So, Yeah, these are just some of the pictures. This is outside the museum on the little balcony there where we could see the Capitol and everything. Love that kind of that picture. And then that right there was part of the Holocaust, I think, or was it Berlin Wall?
Yeah.
Next slide.
Okay, so after the museum, we drove to Old Town Alexandria, which is a section of the town we stayed the night in, but it's like a quaint little area of it. So we went there in the evening and ate dinner there and walked around a bit. And it was really nice because we were able to split up into a few groups for dinner based on where we wanted to eat. And which was nice, we got to choose, and after we ate, we got to go sit down by the river, which you see right there. And we got ice cream, and we just kind of chilled out after that busy day. And I think that was one of my favorite parts, just because we got to spend time with all of our friends, and it was just kind of relaxing after like a very packed day. So we have a video too, but I don't think you can watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very quaint, very pretty.
And Miss Evans should be thanked for that one because I was gonna take him to a strip mall and buy, TGI Fridays, and he said, I don't wanna do that. And I said, I know somewhere else, and so but you have to go down a cobblestone street and stuff with the bus and everything, but he did mark it again, so.
Alright, next slide.
No, it's spinning. Sorry. Maybe I went too far.
Wait for it.
There we go.
Hey.
So those are just some shots of Old Town Alexandria.
See the one on the left, I said, that's a good place to take a picture, sit down. I made him sit on the stairs.
Yeah, that's good. Next slide.
Day 2.
Okay, so on day 2, we woke up early for a quick breakfast at Dunkin' Donuts. Also, our bus driver Mark brought us Krispy Kreme donuts. He got us an entire box of them, and we all ate them up. So that was really great. And then Mark drove us to Mount Vernon to beat the crowds. We spent more time here than expected, but the former estate of George Washington was charming and very educational. When we got there, all of the cherry blossoms and nature around it were just extraordinary to see, and it kind of set you back in time with what he would experience on a daily basis. We walked around the farm, saw Washington's tomb, experienced a 4D theater, and took a tour of the manor. In the 4D theater, we actually were able to choose what side we wanted to pick during the Revolutionary War, and no, it was after the Revolutionary War. And we kind of learned more about isolationism and George Washington's view on the future of America. And then we got to be in the perspective of George Washington, meeting different politicians at the time and choosing who we would side with. So that was really interesting. And then we went to another 4D theater, actually. And in that, we were able to watch the Revolutionary War down the East Coast. And it actually snowed on us, and it felt real. It was pretty cool.
What is the difference between 3D and 4D?
4D is you can smell it. Sometimes there's things for you to.
It's yeah,
Yeah.
it snowed, there was wind blows.
Yeah.
that kind
There
of
was
thing.
smoke coming out
You
of the
can.
ground.
Oh, smoke,
There was
yeah.
constantly lights flashing whenever a gunshot was fired, but yeah, it was really interesting. And then even sitting over the hill, looking at the Potomac was amazing. So at the end, you can see our top right photo, Potomac. Sorry. You can go to the next slide. That's fine. I'll keep Potomac River. Even that was great. Mr. Smith got to talk to an old Navy officer, and do you want to say the quote? Or?
I asked him what he did, and he said, well, I was in the Navy for 40 years. And I said, what do you do now? He says, whatever I want. I said, I like you.
And so as you can see, we just had a nice time walking around, and there were rainbows and bridges and animals. So it was also interesting to see the slavery aspect of the past, and the way that they were housed, and how George Washington kind of treated them is differently than most slave owners, but still interesting to view and see and talk about. There were actually reenactments, people there to talk about it too, so yeah. But yeah, this was one of my favorite parts of the trip. So you can move on to the next slide. Thanks.
Okay, so Museum of Natural History was one of my favorites. I remember going there as a little kid, but it was nice to go there again. It's just like all of the natural history from prehistory to when the humans came here, started making their mark on the earth. But like there's the Hope Diamond, which that was amazing, but it's this tiny little diamond. Hope Diamond, it's gonna be so big, but like it's just this tiny little necklace, but like it was so cool. And you got to see all the dinosaur bones and the mummies, so that was neat. There's a butterfly garden, but I didn't go in there. Yeah, I mean, it's just, what was it, 2 floors, 3 floors? I'm not sure. Three floors of natural history. Michael Daniels and I had a lot of fun going around taking pictures of all the animals. He got really excited about the cat bones. Those little cat skeletons. He got really excited about that. So that was good. And we had, okay. It was really cool. He and I both bought cherry blossom trees there, and the mineral room was really cool because you're just surrounded by all this shiny stuff. And like the gold, all of this is gold right here. It's just walls of gold, emeralds, rubies, everything. So, yeah. On the next slide. Yep, skeletons, dinosaurs, math.
That's Arlington Cemetery. That's not even supposed to be. Oh, there's
The
another
whole
one.
diamond was so misleading. Like all the photos, like leading to it, like said go this way, but it's like this big diamond. It was just like this outline,
this big.
and you get in there, it's
Everyone's
just
crowded,
crowded.
you're
Thing.
like,
I was so depressed at that point because I'm like, oh my god, it's gonna be like a handheld diamond. I get in there, it's just. I'm like, that's the diamond? Like, yeah. I'm like, that's priceless?
Get
Yeah.
that on eBay.
Like, oh man.
Yeah, we were asking the security guard how much it was worth.
Price
Doesn't matter.
I'm like, not in your
Yeah, you can go
not
to
in your
the next slide.
Okay. Oh, I was just gonna say something about the natural history. They're walking around, they have like big, these quirks. It says "We're New York" right on it, so I thought that was kind of neat. So you
Cool.
walk around.
We're done with
From, yeah.
You're
Oh, I'm up here. Okay. Okay. So after the last meeting, we split into 2 groups for what we were interested in. So some people went to American history, some of us went to air and space, because since I've been really little, I've loved stuff that moved in general. I particularly like air and space stuff. So many years ago, I went to Dayton, Ohio, and saw about the Wright brothers, and here they had another big Wright brothers exhibit, and I've nerded out to Mr. Smith about all the little nuances of the Wright brothers stuff when we went to their exhibit. And we only had about 45 minutes in there, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I always wanted to go, and I hadn't been before, so it was very, very great. You know, I think 5 of us went there, and it was just do like a very fast walk to get to as much of it we could, because there's you know, a whole section about aircraft carriers in one section, so Hunter was with us and he's kind of thinking out pretty cool. They have like it's all photos, but like you're on like a metal decking, and they have like all the controls of what the carrier would have that's like put into the museum, so you can like walk up and see stuff. Like full-size planes like from a carrier folded up in there, like with the folding wings. It was so cool to be able to walk up and like be right there with them. But we didn't have much time at all, so we just snapped a few pictures, walked through, kind of there's like a balcony here, so we walked right across there to see as much as we could in a short period of time, then went back up and back up the other part of the room. So that's what was there.
Great. We also went to the Museum of American History. That's where my group went. I think like Maddie and Sydney were with me. Ross was too. Yep. And, yeah. So yeah, a bunch of us went there. The American History Museum has like it's very broad. Like there, you can see anything from the First Lady's dresses to Bill Nye's lab jacket, as you can see there. I know personally, I had a great time there and I learned a lot. I'd definitely say probably my favorite exhibit there was the First Lady's dresses. It was like really weird to see all of them like right there in front of you, like stuff from like, you know, forever ago that people actually wore. It was like insane to see.
It's one of the most popular things.
It is,
The First Lady's dresses is one of the most popular.
every single one.
So then I guess I just kind of have a funny story from this as well. Me and Sydney decided we were going to go and ride these simulators because they like advertise all over the museum, go and ride the simulators in the basement. So we went down to the basement, paid $10 to go on the simulator, and we stood there like forever. And finally we get on the thing. People are like texting us nonstop, where are you? Are you dead? You know, what happened to you? Because like we were supposed to be back to meet up.
I was that group, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've lost children in Washington. What am I going to tell their parents? I was frightened.
Yeah, they like confiscated our phone because we couldn't have them in the simulator, so they're in a locker.
Yeah, because it like
We couldn't
flipped
have-
upside down and stuff.
Yeah.
So turns out we get on this simulator and like we had done like training and stuff for it or whatever. We get on it and we're trying to move the controllers and it won't do anything. So we literally just paid $20 to sit in a metal box. So yeah, and then we found the rest of the group and we were alive and it was all good, but we wasted $20. So yeah.
Yeah, and the rest of us sat on the mall, and we just kind of like talked, and there were people like playing frisbee and stuff. It was really fun and nice. It was like 80 degrees, so it was really warm.
Alright, so we got to Arlington National Cemetery probably around sunset, so we were running low on time. And I was actually supposed to close in about, I'd say, an hour. So we were doing a speed run, but Arlington National Cemetery is beautiful and very humbling and amazing in itself. We got to see the changing of the guard, that was awesome. The people that work there actually are called Sentinels. And me and Mr. Smith were on the assumption that these guys were like the most hardcore guys, they couldn't drink, they were there for like half a year, and I read it all online. So we're walking around just looking at things, and we walk down to where the crypt is, and that's where they're supposed to stay. And there's this guy out there, and Mrs. Evans just walks up and just starts talking to the guy. Turns out the guy is one of the Sentinels that's actually there. And he gives us a one-on-one private interview in this courtyard that he unhooked for us, and we got to ask him any question we wanted to, and I was way off. So was Mr. Smith, but we got the whole rundown. And it was awesome. It was way cool. They are normal guys, but they just trained really hard, and they had to make everything on a uniform. Just very cool to realize that, and just seeing the graves of all the military members is amazing, humbling. The place gives me like a weird kind of vibe, like goosebumps, just by being in there. And so we looked at JFK's grave, stuff like that. But I was there.
One thing about the Sentinel was he was talking to another couple, and Miss Evans goes up and asks him one question, and he's dressed in civilian clothes, so he's just got this thing that says Arlington Cemetery. And she asked him one question, we asked him two questions, he goes, come here. And he walks over, and that's when he started. It turns out that they have to know 70 pages of this, every detail of this thing. So they do know every question, so it's the perfect person to talk to, because that's part of the response. To be able to do it, you have to answer a million of these questions, and it takes them months to be able to get up there.
Yeah, they want people to ask questions, because that's what they have to know, just the entire book.
Well, I first question, I said, can you get married? Because he's
Yeah.
like, they can't get married.
Not married,
He's like,
drinking.
well, there was the drinking too, but
Yeah.
I'm 21. So and they don't have to be a certain height. Their waist doesn't have to be a certain thing. All of that
He
is
said
just
no
a myth.
women, I said no women, 4 women.
There's four women sentinels.
So I actually went there on a mission. So one of my close friends, and probably gonna be my relative, ended up losing some guys in a helicopter crash that's actually buried here, and he's only seen him once. So I wanted to go over and give respect to it, because he's a close relative to me. And so we're like, it's gonna close, and people are leaving, and the cops are pushing people out, and I'm like, I gotta do this. And I got a small group, and I said, I'm gonna go until the cops say I can't go. And we went, and I found it. I got the quick picture, moment of silence. It was nice. I sent it to him, and he was happy. And on our way out, they were closing the gates as we were on the way out, and I was talking to the guy, and he's just like, you know, 5 more minutes and you guys be stuck in there. So, and Mark was right there ready for us, so we got on. It was just a cut. Oh yeah, the guys, they were trying to shoo him out, and we snuck around the bus. It was just getting dark. It was awesome.
There was a police car that was driving with lights on, going very quickly, like back and forth. And I was like, Hunter, here he comes.
He's coming, we going.
And I walked around to this car, and I walked in, and I leaned, and I said, one of my students is over trying to find a grave. He said, okay. He's like, yeah, go ahead. You know, so and they didn't know that.
No, I was on the mission. It was me, Philip, a bunch of guys, we were just going for it. Yeah.
We're lost. Yeah.
And right there, that courtyard is actually where he took us in, which was gated. And he just pops it. When we walked in, that's when I like our one-on-one. It was awesome.
That's where they have funerals of
Yes.
very important people. You don't go in there, but we got to go in because I got a big mouth.
And the view was awesome. The weather held out every day. It was gorgeous. Always in shorts, and it was awesome to be in shorts compared to when I was up here and freeze my butt off. And down there was awesome. Just great.
All right. So it was a great way to close the night. I mean, you hear about the Lincoln Memorial and the Vietnam Memorial and all these just great memorials, and just being able to actually go up and physically see them, especially at night when it was all lighted up and everything, it was just so spectacular. I thought it was a great way to end the night. We were like trying to get it in. I mean, you know, you notice down here, Hunter ended up proposing to Sydney there. We were like, Hunter's trying really hard all night. It's like, oh, I gotta get this in. Finally got it in. It's pretty catchy. But,
Strangers were cheering.
Getting pictures, you know, it was good. We actually, on the Vietnam Memorial, Mr. Smith pointed out to us that there was a fellow alumni, John J. Steglund, I believe, and a family member worked here, I believe. He told us. So that's just again that's really cool that you can find like these people who you basically can associate with on these big memorials. So it was just a great way to end the night. And you see up here, now this was like probably the 7th try maybe to get that picture, because I had Lily over here and I'm like, Lily, everyone's walking away, they're going to the other memorials. I'm like, I gotta get a cool picture. Like I'm trying to get it with the Washington Monument right there. I'm like trying to look like I'm holding up like I'm super strong over there. And Lily's like, the lighting's not good. I'm like, it's fine. Keep going. And I finally got it, and I'm known for those inspirational pictures on Instagram. If you ever, But so I had to get one. But it was just a great way to end the night. It was spectacular. Lincoln Memorial. Vietnam Memorial, Hunter and Sydney just together. It was good.
I would actually say that it's better at night.
It is.
I really enjoyed it at night.
It is better at night.
So less people is just always better, and of course it just looked amazing. Just the lights on it, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was spectacular. So.
Mark helped again.
Mark was always there.
Mark was always there.
And we wanted to go.
Us.
Right on it.
Oh, I hadn't.
Who's that, Ben?
Well, on their way back home, these guys decided to visit Gettysburg, which is actually on their way from DC back to Canajoharie. They stopped, viewed many of the monuments, went to some of the places where Mr. Smith has oftentimes said they would, Gettysburg being one of the first ever places where the battlefield and bodies were actually photographed. They went to these places, and I believe Mr. Smith brought up pictures and showed these guys where the bodies actually were. And you can see Mr. Smith talking to a reenactor, and the reenactor behind this monument. And from what I've been told, these guys felt this vibe and this energy around this area, like you knew something had happened here, like humbling, not harrowing, but vibe that shows that you are part of this great cosmic scheme and something large happened here and something tragic happened
where
here.
is it? What is that place?
Little Round Top.
Yeah, that's Little Round Top.
That's, yeah.
So we're on top of Little Round Top. And why couldn't we go to Devil's Den?
Oh, there's actually a controlled burn going on.
Yeah, see the smoke? There was controlled fire.
So that kind of added to it. Although we couldn't go down there, but all this smoke and fire around kind of felt like you were actually there a little bit, and definitely added to the really cool feeling you got there.
We even saw there are like memorials and statues all over this place. and we actually drove by one that was for the Iroquois. Is it the Iroquois? There was the New York statue was the Iroquois statue for the Iroquois that actually served in that battle of Gettysburg that day. So that was really interesting. I didn't know that Native Americans, fellow Native Americans from around here served down there.
And a really cool thing that I found out later, actually, so I'm doing the ancestry project that we all seem to do, at least not advanced. And I looked up my ancestry, and there was this James Trumbull that it would be on my mom's side. And I went down into his things, and it said his name is actually on a statue we walked by. So he was in the 121st Infantry Division at Gettysburg. So it was really cool that, a part of my family was there at that time, and even if he had died, I wouldn't be here. So it was cool that he was actually there, a very personable feeling.
Okay, so what we learned from this big fun trip. Okay. What I learned personally, I think we all learned something a little different. I learned that I possibly want to work in DC when I graduate college and do all that stuff, because you see like everyone walking around and they're all dressed up in their like business suits and everything, and they all look important and have somewhere to be. And I don't know, I just think that would be the coolest thing, like having an important job in Washington D.C. and I don't know, being a lawyer or doing something. And we actually got to, like Mr. Smith said, watch the House in session, and that was really interesting. Like everyone we saw was just kind of like a normal person, and they were just like talking about their constituents from their home districts and just different normal things, and it didn't seem like too impossible, I guess. So that's what I learned.
I learned that, like, even though there's problems in today's society, obviously, and like America is going through difficult times. It's always a roller coaster, and like sometimes we feel ashamed of our country. Sometimes we just feel like, maybe we should go take a vacation somewhere and get out of America. I just thought. I just felt like a pride in my country when I saw our nation's past and how far we've actually come through the civil rights movement. Like, we're working towards gender equality. We've just come so far as a nation. I just think that shouldn't be overlooked when we're thinking about the times like today. So that's what I learned. And also, like, having been there a couple of weeks before for the March on Washington, for the March for Our Lives, seeing Pennsylvania Avenue again, where there's not like 800,000 people in it, which is that was kind of cool. So I don't know, I like seeing the nation come together like that, and seeing the everyday life in Washington D.C. and our nation's amazing capital. That was very enlightening.
Okay, well, what I learned, I think it's different when Mr. Smith's just telling us, media is kind of a big deal, but like going to the museum and just seeing like the impact and the change that just the media and the news has created, especially with photos, like what one photo can do as opposed to like just a little newspaper clipping, just like the impact of a photo and how it can bring change. And, yeah, basically.
Yeah, going to the place and then putting Mr. Smith on top of it there, like telling you like right there where it's happening, just adds to the effects tremendously. I mean, he's still like a great teacher. I still understand a lot of what he's saying in the classroom, but being there, right there, and him, being our tour guide, it was enlightening, and it's something and many others will take with us into the future. And I think it shapes a lot of us. It helps us bond. It helps us connect more. And it just was a great overall experience.
One thing that should be noted is it was a small group of us that went. And I don't think it would have been the same if it were like a large group of students. Like any larger than this, like maybe 20 is like maximum. But like the bonding that we had, we became a family. They became our parents for a few days. Like it was amazing, and we had one-on-one discussions with people that we met there, and with Mr. Smith and with Ms. Evans, and just the learning was so in depth. And I just feel like it would have been like more of a hassle, more rush of like, okay, we gotta go do this now, or okay, we gotta go do this now. We gotta plan every single hour of the trip. If we had had more than 20 people on the trip, which would have been not as fun, and we wouldn't be standing up here with smiles on our faces telling you how amazing it was.
And we still rushed.
And we still had to rush, but we
Thank Dr. Mark.
enjoyed it. We could think on like, we could be like, oh, we spent more time here. Let's all decide. Let's split. Let's go here, and let's take one group go with Ms. Evans, go here. One group go with Mr. Smith, go here, whichever you want. But like, if it had been like more kids, it would have been really hard. So.
Like walk up to the Aaron Fish Museum, they have like the big 55 passenger buses, like the huge coach buses, and just big masses of people. But they're standing there waiting for like, to get on the bus or to get in the museum. It takes so long to get a large amount of people through like 3 doors to get in the museum. When we walked up, as like half the group was like, it was like 6 people. We walked in, went through security, easy as that. Like, we figured out the whole security route. Like I had, I kept as little on myself as I could. Just my front pockets. Like to come out, go in the tray, come out of the tray, go back in my pockets. Just kept it simple. And it was nice to be able to have that small group to get in and out of museums. And then like Union Station and the Reagan building, we ate lunch there also. But the food courts, you go to the food court, yeah, there's a lot of places, there's a lot of tables, but a lot of them are filled. And you can usually find enough tables together that we can eat together there. If we had a large group, it would be hard to find food somewhere. Like it would take easily twice as long to get through the lines. When, you bring such a mass of people, and it takes long to get through everything. To sit together too is great.
Yeah.
Also, it's nice to think back to like Mr. Smith always telling stories in class about like what we're, when I was in Washington, when I was in college, I did this. And when I was in Washington, I did this. Oh, I rode my bike here. I rode my bike there. Well, we were there to actually see where he was able to go and see what he saw when he was there years and years ago.
You might want to finish up. It's getting kind of long. I love you. Don't get me wrong. Man.
So, in closing, although I was not able to make it, I'm sorry, but
let's just make sure everybody had what they learned. Louis?
Well, I would like to say how humbling it was to be there with so many people around me at the same time as we were in a close group. I could see many people respecting our nation. Like that was the place to come. We were at the Capitol, and there were so many people from all around the world that were there to see that place and standing there, like I felt all of the energy of the past and the people that came there before. So, yeah.
touching on all these things. Mac's inspirational picture, Hunter's vibe he felt at Gettysburg, Louis' energy he felt. These things aren't things you can experience in the classroom. These are things you need to go out and experience for yourself. And that's why I believe that what we learned and what you should learn is the value of these field trips and why we should allow students to take these field trips and accept more teacher field trips to go and experience these experiences. Because you can't be taught a vibe, you can't be taught an energy that you feel inside of yourself. You can't be taught that inspiration. You have to go, you have to look at it, you have to feel it, you have to touch it, taste it, do whatever you need. Because Mr. Smith can talk to you, Mrs. Prime, Mr. Field, they can talk to you about Mozart, Bach, ATP energy, anything. It doesn't matter. But until you go and you stand in Gettysburg and you feel what other people had felt, until you go to DC and you feel the energy of our country's heart beating, it's not the same as Mr. Smith saying DC is our capital. You feel the capital. And that's why I believe that field trips are so important. And I just want to thank you all for allowing us to have this
time. We want to thank you all for making this possible.
Yeah, thank
you.
Mr. Smith and Miss Evans too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
I'd do it again like that, with a group like this. It was awesome. It was one of the best field trips I've ever been on.
All right, well, thank you very much. It was really
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, the next one on the agenda is board goals. We had online an updated version of the goals. Bring that up. And the floor is open for discussion. You want to just kind of look at it for a minute first? Sure.
The highlighted section.
highlighted sections are what's.
Yeah, that's what's different.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I like that suggestion, that works for me. That first yellow.
Just for the public who are here, you know, we've had a number of meetings to arrive at, we've had a couple of board retreats and so forth, you know, to arrive at at the first drafts, and then we've had a couple of meetings where we've kind of gone through it again, and so we're hoping that this is moving toward the final draft. Obviously, goals are always going to be changing, but at least for now, this is what our vision of the school district looking forward, in conjunction with our new vision, mission, and values.
On the number, technology goal area, number 4. Just take out as.
I'll take out as, yeah.
Yeah,
do that.
okay, good.
Obviously, also for the public who are here, this is obviously going to be published and available for everyone to view and to give feedback on. Once we get to
So, again, for the public, this is kind of the final step of us bringing the vision, mission, values to reality. I'm okay with all of these. I think you did a good job of interpreting what we had wanted to try to put there.
Anything else?
Oh, good to me,
I just had one, somewhat of an extended comment, which is that I think this is a great vision, goal, vision of goals. It's very comprehensive, which is good. But I do think that we really need to have one more discussion, not tonight, but maybe next month or maybe over the summer, where we go through all of these goals and really pick 3 or 4 that we really want to make sure happen this year. Because all of these goals will take years to accomplish. And I think we really need to prioritize and say, for example, I went through and looked at all the things that will be new initiatives based on these goals, the things that and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 new initiatives. And I'm hoping they'll all happen this year, but I don't think so.
No. Well, that's not the intent of these.
No, I understand, but what I'm saying though is that I think we should, out of all these, pick a handful that we would really like to concentrate on this year, and that are realistic, achievable, and and I think that's kind of the next step once we agree on this master plan.
Totally agree.
Okay.
I mean, this is supposed to be our long-term, what we're trying to get to.
I just want to suggest we have that
Perfect.
next step
Yes,
once
we need to.
agree on this. Okay, so if there's no other comments, I guess that means that I don't think we have to have a vote on this, do we? Or?
We probably ought to
Probably
adopt them.
adopt them.
Okay, so do I have a motion to adopt these goals?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, great. Next one is test refusals.
I have a handout too, because it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, I'll take that one. So recently we completed the 3 through 8 ELA and math state assessments, and we wanted to report back on participation for this year for the 2018 assessments. Just like to remind the board that under NCLB and under the Every Student Succeeds Act, there is a federal requirement for districts that receive title monies that districts have a 95% participation rate on the ELA and math assessments. The first box shows English Language Arts with a total number of students, the number of students who participated, the participation percentage rate, the number of refusals, and the refusal participation rate. So we had a variety of participation and refusals across the grade levels. Our averages across 3 through 8 are 61% participation and 39% refusal. If you look right below that, I compared it to last year where we had a 58% participation rate and a 42% refusal, so we had a few more students participating this year than last year. Under math,
Debbie?
yep.
Can you summarize the consequences of not getting the manufacturers?
Yep, I have that down at the bottom.
Okay, perfect.
And under mathematics, it's very similar. Our participation rate was 63% and our refusal rate was 37% compared to 59 and 41% last year. At the bottom, I've put in a couple of considerations, and there's things that we will want to think about as we move forward. One of the challenges with participation is that under Race to the Top, which has nothing to do with NCLB and nothing to do with ESSA, but it was a pot of money that states could apply for that included Common Core implementation and teacher evaluation. New York State chose to use the assessments as part of the teacher evaluation system, and that has been problematic for a lot of different reasons, and we've discussed those before. I think what's important right now to be current is that there is current legislation under consideration to remove the assessment data piece from the teacher evaluation process. So to decouple those, to move that separate, and some of it has to do with the fact that it hasn't quite worked the way that I think people who applied for Race to the Top back in the day, that money is now done and gone, envisioned it, but also because as the Every Student Succeed Act Accountability Plan comes into play, and we're going to provide you a summary with that in just a little bit, there is still the requirement for 95% participation, and under ESSA accountability, districts that do not have 95% participation will be required to write and submit remediation plans on how you're going to get there. And again, that's tied to Title I money, or the title monies. So there is some work to be done, I think, in terms of talking to more people in our district and opening that forum up a little bit around the participation rate of the assessment, where the assessments have been. They've been shortened. There's going to be more changes, we are told, to the assessments, and then figure out how to move forward. But right now, we will most likely, I would say with pretty good certainty, be looking at required remediation plans at the elementary and middle level for participation. So even if 100% of our 61% of our students who participated were proficient where they should be, it doesn't matter. We haven't met the participation rate. That's the first cut. That has always been the first cut since 2002, since NCLB. That continues under ESSA. So that's something that we're going to need to take a look at.
And do the consequences get complicated even more if you're not meeting the participation rate and your results are low?
Yes.
Don't you lose some control then?
It is possible, but when we talk about the ESSA accountability, that's looking a little bit different. So there's now
So it's
different levels
It's
of.
getting modified a little bit.
They've modified it a little bit, but the basic premise is still the same. If you're not meeting participation and students who are taking the test are not showing growth, then that's gonna be
There's
there
more consequences.
there could be a problem for the district in that regard. And that's factual, that's trying to
I
take
know,
out
okay.
all of the personal philosophical places, that's just based on what's written in legislation and what we know right now about ESSA accountability for New York State. It's just fact-based.
One other thing I'd like to share with you when we were discussing this point for tonight's agenda. One of the things that we discussed was the fact that we really haven't had any public sessions with parents and students about these assessments, what their significance is, both for the student, for the teachers, for the district, and what are the concerns that are causing 40% of the parents to opt their students out of the testing, so that we can start to have a dialogue on this. And I think that's something that we really should look to do in the fall. And, so that we can really begin to address those concerns and make sure that everyone's understanding is factual and reality-based. And so, that's something I think that, if we all agree, that's
So
something.
maybe that would be a really good topic for our fall open house.
Well, I mean,
The
our
community,
our
yeah,
community
the
event.
community event, right. Question.
Any other discussion? Because one of the things that's obvious, not only from last year, but for a number of years, and everyone knows how I feel about high-stakes standardized testing, but there's been a steady and significant refusal rate in our district. And if I was a parent, I might be part of it, but we need to, at this point, it could become damaging for our district if we don't begin to really address it and see what we can do to avoid those damages.
Totally agree. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on this? Okay, moving right along, student representative report, take it away, Danielle.
All right. So I just have 3 things that happened, honestly, just last week. The first of which was the National Honor Society induction. That was last Thursday, something like that. It was a complete success. Everyone who was inducted was very deserving of it. The ceremony went off very well. Everyone seemed pretty happy, except for when Ethan Prance's hair lit on fire. I think that was the favorite part of the thing.
Just momentarily.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Wait, come on, how did this happen?
Okay, so he
In the field.
Samantha was gonna pee in her pants. And she couldn't stop laughing once that, oh my God. And then I couldn't look at her, because every time I looked at her, I wanted to laugh. It was fun.
He bent over to sign the book, and his hair went in the candles that we lit and his hair was smoking, and someone screamed in the audience, and yep, there was a fire in someone's hair.
So then Mrs. Prime was kind enough to move the desk over next to the table, so we had a little distance.
I was not laughing.
I wouldn't have been either.
Well, once it was out.
Yeah,
everybody
that's
just had a
different.
moment.
Yeah, it wasn't like an actual fire,
No.
like his whole head
Just a
was on
little
fire. It was
smoke.
like literally just a spark and then
Yeah.
smoke, and then, yeah.
Okay, thank you for the details.
Thank you. All right, anyway, then there was prom that weekend on Saturday. It was a rainy day, but everybody still had a lot of fun. The theme of this year's prom was Enchanted Forest, and it was a very fitting theme with the Pine Lake venue. The day prior, and honestly for months prior, the prom committee worked very hard to get the decorations in order for the prom, and that day before we traveled up and decorated the venue, and we were all surprised how well it actually ended up looking. And honestly, a lot of people who attended the prom were also very surprised because it wasn't exactly the first choice of venue, but everyone was happy with it, and it honestly ended up being the best choice in the end. It was great food, great decorations, great music, and it was a great success. And then, of course, right after that was post-prom. And every year, of course, it's a great event. It's held by SAD every year, and they have to raise a ton of money and put a ton of work into this event, and it's greatly appreciated. This year, of course, as usual, there's lots of food there to like keep you awake and stuff. There were 2 tarot card readers. There's the belly flop contest, an Easter egg hunt where you could like win money. There's a mind reader, and then there's like a huge raffle at the end, per usual. And some of the prizes for that were included an Apple Watch, a Bluetooth speaker, like school supplies, camping supplies, just anything you could think of, pretty much that you would want. It was there. TVs, yeah, and it was a great event. Everyone was pretty sad when it was over, because it just felt like the night just rushed by, personally for me and my friends anyway. And there were a lot of funny moments and a lot of memories from the event. So yeah, that's all I have.
Any questions, comments? Go ahead.
I was just curious, participation in prom out of the classes, and same with post-prom.
I'm not sure. I would have to check with the advisors.
It looked about the same. Tracy, you think it's about the same? Because you guys had the list for post-prom.
Yeah, I could look it up on my, hang on. I could
But
give you
it was about the same as
Yeah.
it's been.
The reason I ask is one of the things we talked about when we went off-site was we didn't want students excluded, and I just wanted to have an idea of, you know, how many are dropping out when we're moving that. I think we should really track
Track
that.
that, okay. Well, we have ticket sales, there's
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
we can get that from the
definitely go to the
advisors.
class, and Mrs. Pamkowski, because of all the deposits, has the numbers, so
Has
we
numbers, so
could
we
track
can
it
get that.
historically, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I would
To get,
I would just wanna make sure.
I can have her do that.
Because that was
We
one of
can-
our concerns, so I think we
Correct.
should
Yep.
be either validating it or denying it, you know?
We did have a lot of students who opted out of going to the prom, but they did, juniors and
They
seniors,
came to the
but they did
post-prom?
come to post-prom instead. Yeah, I mean, they just didn't want to go to the prom.
Yeah.
I don't believe it was for monetary
Financial reasons.
reasons at all. Yeah, it was good.
There were probably about 140 students there though at prom, which is pretty good when it's open to juniors and seniors, so.
Yeah, it was a huge venue, and the entire huge venue was filled. It was pretty jam-packed. That was like the main concern about this venue and why it wasn't the first choice, because of the venue being so big and it was gonna look like nobody was there. But it was fine in the end. There were a lot of people.
I have one thing to say on behalf of the board. I would really like to thank Tracy Evans and Ms. Hammonds for all the incredible work they put into making
It's nice, like, I can't think, his name is Mark DeSeo, or he runs Subway up there. I sent him an email, he usually he gives us the 6-inch sub coupons that we get I said, you know what? It doesn't hurt to ask, this is how we got all the information from the Sentinel at Arlington. So I sent him an email, I said, would you mind supplying us with subs for 150, 200 people at our post-prom party? Sure. Boom, we got free subs and everything that you could imagine with it. So, yeah, it was
We should send
free.
them a note.
Free.
We should send
I
them.
will. And
Yes.
and the other thing that, with regard to prom, we do have the dresses that we have 2 racks full of dresses that people have donated, and the girls come in and look at them, and we did have several girls take the dresses.
Use them.
I tell them, if they come back, great. If they don't, great too. I don't worry about it.
more?
I did get more, yep, and then some of the girls went through and got rid of kind of the dated ones. But we still have 2 racks, and the girls love, so that's also something. Okay.
Thank you. Well, thank you again.
Yeah,
for all
yeah,
your
no,
efforts.
absolutely. Yeah, free.
Okay, anything else on that, on the student report?
Yeah, I just want to make one other comment about the National Junior Honor Society. You did a really nice job as well. And you even quoted Ferris Bueller. But that, anytime there's a nice community event, it's good for our students, so you did a nice job.
But there was no hair on fire?
No hair on fire.
I'll set the bar a little higher next year.
Please don't, please don't.
Okay, the next point on the agenda is the safety update.
So this I embedded right into the information this afternoon. The school safety it's different than just the school safety officer, so there's just an update on some other safety things as well. So Officer Cruzzi continues his hallway patrol and building presence, continues his exterior building patrol and student parking lot patrol during this week period. He also identified, just as an example, I like just to give some examples of something. He identified an unlocked storage shed, informed Mr. May. He's continuing with his classroom visits. He has reported reading with a small group of students, being a ping pong partner for a student in phys ed who needed one, and then visiting with a class for snack and a writing activity. So
He's come to my law class twice also.
Oh, there you go. And his law class. He also is providing some resource liaison support. So he has been working, he worked with the person in charge of the sex offender registry to get an update in advance of our visitor identification badge system. He's been a liaison with mental health and a liaison with probation along with the building principals. So he's working hand in hand or shoulder to shoulder with them and helping to use some of his contacts as a member of law enforcement to get some things done, get some assistance to students and or families and the principals. He's also, I think, this piece to me is happening quicker than I personally may have anticipated, but I'm certainly pleased to see it. He's also beginning to provide some prevention support. So students are sharing information with him because he is everywhere all the time, and it seems like he's everywhere all the time in the buildings, about potential problems. He informs them and lets the principals know in following up on those concerns, and in at least 2 different occasions, and I'm sure there's probably more, it's what I counted today, he's supporting principals' communications with parents regarding potential problems. So what we're seeing is a preventative effect because students have and do see him as someone they can talk to and share information with. So that's something very positive. It's not been that long, it's only been since April 9th that we've had him in the district. So I think that speaks to the work that he's trying to do in terms of our first goal that we stated, which is to build relationships with students and be seen as a resource. So we also, in June, we will give you the full budget survey results, but I took a moment just to kind of briefly, this is preliminary results, so don't trust the numbers because they may not be accurate, but the general consensus on our budget survey question around the school safety officer program continuation. We had 78 responses to the budget survey in general. 62%, or 62, excuse me, numbers, not percent. 62 respondents said yes, continue the program. 4 said no, and 12 offered no response to the question. So that's preliminary data. When we do the big budget survey analysis in June, we'll give you the exact numbers, but that's just to give you a sense of how that question was responded to. Also, there are just a couple of things that are upcoming actions, meaning between now and the end of the school year. We really want to take a look at the high school coverage between 7 and 7:15 a.m. We have some safety team meetings scheduled, and where one's going to be rescheduled. We are installing the visitor identification badge system. We are reviewing proposals now for security cameras with day automation. That's part of our capital project planning. I'm completing the safety survey. If you'll recall, we said in May we would do a safety survey to students and to the community around the school safety officer program. So that's getting completed. And also we had agreed that we would do an evaluation of the East Hill safety monitor positions, and that'll occur in June.
What's the content on the survey?
The content is going to be 2 things. It's going to be perceptual, because it's still in draft form right now, so it's going to be some perceptual, what are people thinking and feeling about it, but then it's also going to be actionable, what kinds of actions or what have you seen or heard that the school safety officer has contributed to the school community.
Okay.
So it's going to be questions around those 2 things right
It
now.
might be good to just get a feel of what people person could add. Just,
What else would you like to see
yeah,
involved in
exactly,
the
that
program?
kind of thing.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I'm sorry, I was writing, I didn't want to lose that
No,
sentence,
it's fine.
that's a good thing.
I had a question. What is the composition of the safety team?
It's what we had talked about before and what's in the district safety plan, which are parents, teachers, school staff, health services, the local police officer, and at the high school, we have students, do we have students on the high school? And students at
And
high
it's
school.
by building, right?
By building. Well, East Hill Middle's combined by complex,
Okay.
because they're gonna be talking about issues in that physical space, and the high school is separate.
And East Hill has parents from both schools?
Yeah, the complex has parents from both levels, yeah. Yes.
I'd just like to add, I had a conversation with Officer Buzzi the other day when I was at school, and he's very encouraged by how things have developed in terms of his relationship with the students. As you know, I had some significant hesitations, but at this point, it looks like it's going quite well. One story that he told me was quite moving. He said when he was in the elementary school, there was this one kid who was kind of afraid of him. He came up to him and he said, "Are you going to arrest my mom?" And he said that after a few weeks, that the kid, then started to view him as somebody that he could trust or relate to, and he just was quite moved by that. And as I just wanted to share. Yeah, go ahead.
On that same note, like he first came, the kids were like high-fiving him, and some wouldn't. Now, all the kids high-five him, and when I was walking down the hall, coming back from swimming, he was out in front of the office, and he was trying to walk the children to wherever they were going, and they were latched onto him, and he's like didn't know what to do, but they were hugging, like literally hugging him. He is part of the Canada Harry family. He is totally fit into our, they view him as one of us. They don't view him as, they see him as a police officer, but they see him as, there's been a police officer in our building forever, and they love him. So it's been a wonderful addition. Absolutely.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Debbie. Next is the discipline report.
So we have a couple of, this is going to be actually a three-part report tonight because we have a bonus for you at the end. I'm going to leave that as
Is there ice cream involved?
Sadly, no, but if we would have known, we would have run that. Last year, we shared with you some information just about what's happening with discipline in the district. But I want to just start by reminding everyone just a couple of things about the orientation around student expectations for behavior, just behavior in general. So I hope you'll indulge me for just a minute. Behavior is a form of communication to help us get what we want. And if you think back to your own behavior and sometimes how you choose to act, it is one of those things that helps you get what you want. I know there's certain things I do to make Jeff Grimshaw, to help Jeff Grimshaw help me do things. I always pick on Jeff Grimshaw, but anyway. So it's the same thing for kids. It's a form of communications to get your needs met. It is contextual. We don't act the same way in every single place where we are. One of the things we learn as social beings growing up is that you become and you learn, I act this way in this venue, I act this way at home, I act this way in a restaurant, and we learn those things. However, for some of us, that's a little bit of a different road to take. And so we learn behaviors or we learn responses to expectations, which is really what school discipline is about, that may be functional for us or that may be dysfunctional for us because we don't have choices in our tool bag or we haven't learned the skills yet to make the best choices. So when we're talking about what we're going to share today, which is the level of different consequences that we have in a period of time this year, the principals are going to talk about that, and then compare it to last year. That's one piece of data, but that's only about one piece. we're gonna follow that up with, well, what do we do? So when we think about how do you move forward, because everybody makes mistakes, but if we're missing a skill, and if kids are missing a skill, how are we moving forward to help students gain the skills they need to meet the expectations of school, which really reflect expectations in the world? We're going to do that, and then we'll have our little bonus at the end. So I'm going to ask the principals to share information just about what they are seeing in terms of discipline patterns, and I think we're going to go big kid to little kid today. Because that's how the chart is lined up.
I think one of the things is we have tried to come up with it, as you can see the one asterisk there that says it's multiple different kinds of detention. We do a modified in-school detention, we do regular detentions, we do after-school detention, we do lunch detentions, trying to find different things that might work for different students, and always our goal is to limit their time out of the classroom whenever possible. And so a lot of what we try to do and working with the PPS team has just become a much bigger part of it. Because we're always talking about the students, especially students who tend to have repeated behaviors that need some support, again, to learn how to make better choices. To talk about those students at our SST, and then to think about ways that we can help them, again, to make better choices. Whether that's
SST.
Student support team, that's listed there. Oh, sorry,
You're on the data, it's just the data.
oh, just the data. So, again, with the detentions, I thought we were just talking about all collectively.
No, we're gonna do
With the
data first.
detentions, again, we're looking at different ways of doing that, so it's not always an in-school suspension. People might spend, if they have study halls, if they have, time during guided studies, that may be when they serve their detention, so that they're not, again, missing class time. And so I think that's why we see that number there. And then we talked a little bit before about the DASA and VADER numbers going up. We did have to make some changes. DASA is the Dignity for All Students Act, and VADER is how they report.
It's violent and disruptive incidents.
Right. Issues that are more potentially aggressive in nature.
Right.
Not necessarily physically, but in ways like that. And we've done a lot to work on making sure those things are reported accurately, including recently, Jen and I went through School Tool to make sure that our discipline codes aligned with what the state asks us to do, because now they're changing from DASA and VADER to the next step. So I think some of those numbers are different a lot because we've made the right moves to make sure that all the codes match and to make sure that things that are reported and match those incidences are reported that way. If that makes sense.
State requires that we report DASA and VADER incidents each year, and they do regularly, I don't want to say frequently, but regularly change and ask for information in different ways.
The one number I'll really talk about is the spike we have in detentions. Something that we.
Do you want us to ask questions by school, or do you want us to wait?
Oh, I think by school's fine.
By school, sorry.
By school, because then we can stay on that topic.
Good.
Thank you for showing the data. The question I had is the out-of-school suspensions is significantly higher, and really what I wanted to know is, do you see a particular reason that students, a behavior trend of what's causing that? That's really what I'm looking for.
Well, I can tell you one long-term suspension can greatly affect that from year to year. So if I have a student that has a significant violation and, for example, they're taken to a superintendent's hearing, then they get additional days of out-of-school suspension. Even if it's one instance, you're gonna see
Is that days or number?
increase, right? You said it was.
Is this a number of days, or is this the instances?
Yes. This is the instance, but if I suspend them out and then they get suspended for the result of the hearing, that's gonna count. You're gonna see an additional suspension there. I would also say that this year, one of the things I've done with some of our students who struggle to change midstream, so if they're having a difficult day responding positively to people, I've been giving people and families, we've had conversations with families where I'll say, I can put your student in school, here's what they're gonna need to do for the rest of the day. Or if you feel like it's better for you to have an opportunity to be with your student, to do something else, then you're welcome to take that opportunity. Just know it's gonna count as an out of school for the second half of the day or what have you. And so I do have families who sometimes choose that option, sometimes because if their student's in a particular place where they don't feel like they're gonna be able to turn it around and have a successful experience in school, then they may choose the out-of-school option.
So what I was really getting at is incidents, so I'll give you an example, not saying this is true, just as to get at what I was asking. Is it, we're seeing more drug issues, or we're seeing more behavioral issues, or we're seeing more, is there a trend of what's driving that?
I don't think there is. I think it just depends on the severity of the incident. And again, this year more so than I've done in the past with some of my students who do seem to have more trauma-based behaviors. I've given them that option if they feel like they know they can't have a successful in-school experience because it's only gonna lead them to more consequences. Some of them choose that out-of-school option. And so I've given them that choice a couple of times, again, in conjunction with conversation with their parents, but I don't necessarily think we see any specific trending in one way or the other.
I just have one question or comment. I think certainly the suspensions are a concern, but I'm very concerned with the DASA and the Vader incidents. And I would say on different things for each of them. For DASA, I'd like to really have a discussion, probably would need to be an executive session, about what the nature of these incidents are. So that, to discuss whether maybe there might be some educational issues that it might raise in terms of things that we can deal with all the students, to raise their level of understanding of the question of sexual harassment, of disabilities, of racial harassment, and so forth. And to really examine our school climate and our school environment in terms of these incidents. And Vader, I think, certainly, and again, probably an example, but it might give some guidance to us in terms of our safety committee and threat assessment committee to know what kinds of things we're seeing, how they come about, and so forth. So I would say that for the elementary and the middle school as well, because I think that would be helpful.
In the middle school, the number I'm really going to speak about is the rise in the detention number from year to year. Essentially, what I've asked people to do as I've transitioned in this year is teachers do have the ability to assign things like recess detention, where they want to keep the student in for something to happen in the class, whether they want to speak to the student, have the student catch up for missed time, things like that. What I've asked is when it becomes a frequent thing where the same student is making the same mistake over and over, that it's something that we submit formally, so that way that data is harvested, so it's something that we can see and share. Because if one teacher's doing it and not sharing it with their team at large, the same thing could be happening in multiple classes and it would fall through the cracks. So we've tried to, once it gets to that repetition, we've tried to, submit it through an actual referral so we can better, harvest that data so we can, help those students who, who might need that counseling session, who might need to be brought to PPS, who might need that extra attention to get them moving in the direction that we're really hoping for. As it relates to the in-school and out-of-school suspensions, I don't find that right now there's a trend or a pattern. A lot of it is, poor choices by middle school students. It doesn't seem to be related to any particular area.
Any questions, comments?
Have you defined repetitive for the teachers to know, once a week, twice?
If it's happening on more than a weekly basis, or multiple times a month, then that's the point we want it submitted to an actual online referral or a school-to-school referral.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
East Hill, the focus is really a consequence married with how do we teach the skill. And certainly my frame is that it's a work in progress and we want to be as transparent as possible. And what's neat about where we are is that our procedures were developed by a group of teachers last August in our East Hill Conscious Discipline Procedure book. I mean, of course, as the administrator, I would assign any suspensions or things like that, but the teachers are driving with us in what power system works and the procedure. And so one reason we see that nice rise, and I'm going to say it's a nice rise only because it's better data, cleaner data, and people are putting things in the system, and we'll continue to work on that until everyone is as accurate as possible. One, the consequences at East Hill are always reasonable, relevant, and related. We have, of course, perhaps when we first started conscious discipline, we swung a little bit too much to focusing on the skill, and now I am always very clear about what the consequence is. I do weekly robocalls home to our families now on Sundays, and 2 Sundays ago it was, maybe it was last Sunday. It was the action, the student's action, helpful or was it hurtful? And if it was hurtful, there's typically a consequence, but also what can we teach you so that next time it can be helpful? And so thinking about that both with adults and with children, I find it have been very useful, and it's one of those conscious discipline tenets. One item that is not here that is something we use often at East Hill is removal from activities. We have had 124 incidences of removal from activities from September to May 15th. And what does that look like? That looks like a child who was not safe at recess does not go to PE later that afternoon. You weren't able to keep your hands to yourself on the playground. You're going to sit here with me in this office, and you're not going to go to PE because I can't trust that you're going to show enough self-control. Let's talk about that. Let's say in music, you were running around the room or you were doing something inappropriate. We're going to, next music class you're not going, you're going to work with me or Mrs. Nair. We're going to talk about what you should do differently. We're going to practice getting up and getting in line, things like that. So it's practicing so that you can then re-enter. So removal from activities is something we use often because it's that teachable moment, but we can't just expect something to change by doing the same thing over and over again. So what can we do differently to try and help that child turn that behavior from a hurtful behavior to how can it be successful?
I have so has that been successful, the removal from activity? I mean, have you seen a reduction in those students' continuation of those actions?
It works for some, and for those that it doesn't work for, and we then have to go up to the next plan. Okay, so this is now a continual problem. We need to work with the teacher to come up with a plan, do some more intentional focused. This is ever see the trend, and then it becomes a discussion.
Anything else?
As a follow-up to Mark's, are you doing that based on data where you're analyzing and at what frequency you're looking at those students and what triggers it to say, okay, this needs to be escalated to a more intentional intervention, et cetera?
Yeah, well, this is a nice segue too to the next one. So, may I?
Before you segue
yep.
though,
Yep.
one of the things I'd like to request is that members of the board receive copies of the CD procedure.
Oh, I'd love to. Excellent.
So that we can get a good sense of how it's working.
Yes, great. So is it?
Okay,
Is
we're
that
ready to
right?
go?
Okay.
Okay, yep, we're gonna go down to the PowerPoint slide. So, PowerPoint slide?
Is that-
So-
No, the PowerPoint slide. No, it says PD, I was gonna say, I'm sorry. Confusing.
I'm going to pass out a reflection sheet, which is usually our first step. So let's say we have a few of these reflection sheets and you're still not keeping your hands to yourself. Well, that tells us that we need to do more than the reflection sheet. So here, for example, is a shoulder-to-shoulder teacher worksheet. We, again, strongly believing that we need to teach a skill and that we don't all have the skills to be able to help teach the students. So this is a teacher worksheet that Michelle completes with the classroom teacher focused on that target behavior. And you can see that we identify what the child is missing. So it's not just it's not just the hitting, it's the what's causing it. I can't control my anger, I don't show self-control, I'm too impulsive, things like that. And so then we identify that, what can we do differently in the classroom, what can the teacher assist with to help the child, maybe it's something on the desk, maybe it's a reminder, maybe it's a visual cue, maybe it's I make a commitment with my teacher before I go out to recess, and then we also include follow-up, because we can't just think that a drive-by, this is gonna fix it, but we spiral back around. And actually then, let's say that doesn't work, because we keep learning and we keep trying new things. We then can bump it up to a school family worksheet, which is then we actually dissect it even more to see, because we talk a lot about the brain states. Is the child in the executive, the emotional, or survival? So we pinpoint where exactly we think it sits, and sometimes we get it and sometimes we don't. And this typically involves a team meeting with Jen's PPS team, which has been phenomenal, the classroom teacher, to really design additional supports and to focus and dissect it, investigate it more thoroughly. I had two examples because I think those anecdotes are often helpful. We have a second grader, oh my goodness. Second grade, it was causing some disruption. And so the PPS team went through these stages, developed, was it Ms. Ortiz ultimately who worked with, I want to give credit, Mrs. Snow? And Dr. Swart developed a plan for this child in second grade. This child had 19 referrals from September through Christmas, including out-of-school suspension, in-school, probably full gamut. I'm pretty sure I can say that. The plan into place included some Legos, included a break. Mrs. Nair was involved. Since January to now, to today, the child has had 2 referrals. So we consider that.
So and they're minor.
Another another child in 4th grade, he would ask about what type of out-of-school suspensions. At the elementary school, we see safety,
That's the biggest
like a tearing up a
driver.
And or at 4th grade, we might also see very inappropriate sexually innuendo comment behavior, things like that. This child demonstrated both. This child we had to bump up even further than the paperwork I gave you. Our top thing before school family support is actually high intensity support meeting, where we meet weekly to talk about the plan and rejig. That we include some special ed staff, and we include a parent in this particular case, and in this case, which is phenomenal, we included our outside counselor from St. Mary's, Martha, what's Martha's last name? I can't get it off the top of my head, but she's here Monday mornings, Martha. So we had everybody at the table. The parent and Martha suggested something we hadn't thought of, and that has worked. And so the child, since we've started this, has not had enough out-of-school suspension. So while there's still some behaviors, we consider it a success because it's not as severe.
De-escalating.
It's de-escalating.
So Stacy's given us some examples of things that happen in all the buildings as a result after the consequence. So what's the recovery? What's the moving forward? How do you help build the response that is more successful for students than not? And I don't know who wants to, you've talked about some, are there others?
I can jump in real quick. One of the big things we use,
is
especially for conflict in the middle school, is just peer mediation. When there's conflict between students, letting that tension settle down, whether it's, a period later, sometimes 5 minutes later, bring those students in, try to clear the air, get them both talking about what happened, what upset them, why they acted or reacted the way they did, and try to, move forward on a positive note. And then sometimes that peer mediation takes place with myself or Ms. Buteau. Ms. Nair has been down before, just by happenstance, happens to be walking through the middle school and sits in on something. But one of the areas for improvement that really came out of the conscious discipline training in the middle school a couple weeks ago was the staff has a desire to kind of know, they want to know the route to go without just throwing a referral in and sending someone to the office. And what they approached me about is maybe giving us kind of a tree branch of if these things are happening, who's our go-to, where is Emily on these days, or when can I send them over to, if Sherry's not here, who else can help them? Because we do have a variety of different counselors and support here for students, but I think that there's a gap that teachers don't always know where they are or how to get a hold of them, so that's a huge area for improvement for us. But I think, you know, one of the most meaningful things is, you know, just taking the time to have a conversation about, you know, an action or a reaction. Yesterday morning before we left for Rensselaerville, I had a student who, you know, was giving minor, I guess having a minor issue in the classroom just around, you know, moving a seat and working with somebody. And they chose to leave the classroom to go down to the office, and I just happened to catch them in the office before they, or in the hallway before they got to the office, and just talked about, you know, decision making and choices, and they have two choices, and you know, to think about what they're doing and to go just move a seat for 35 minutes, work with someone who might be new to them or it might be uncomfortable, or go down to the office and face a consequence and go that route. In a quick 30-second conversation or minute conversation, the light bulb kind of clicked. He was like, "Thank you, Mr. DiPaolo," turned around, went back to class. And the teacher actually later was like, "I don't know what you said to him, but he had a great class, so thank you." So I mean, those conversations, instead of it just being punitive damage, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, you know, having that teachable moment and, you know, visiting, you know, what happened with those kids, I think that, you know, it makes a difference, even if it's, you know, on a day-by-day, case-by-case basis.
There are some cases where we have to go even further. We might find, as Stacey pointed out, the behaviors are the child's way of explaining that there's something not right. And we, through the PPS team and the counselors and our social worker and our crisis counselor and the whole group, we are actually making strides with families as well. We would like to pursue that more, where we are able to help families get access to outside services, like outside counseling services, that the child can talk about those deeper feelings that are school appropriate in counseling sessions, getting mental health supports. We also have programs, there's a program called SPOA, Single Point of Access. What that person does is they come into the home, they set goals with the family, they help them through crisis there, help them figure out how to use community supports that are in place already. So they kind of work with the families. We have found that the quicker that we are getting those resources to the family's hands, we're seeing a huge impact with the student at school. So that's our, we're always moving in that direction. Is okay, once this is the student in our seat right now, but there's a reason why they're acting the way that they are, and we have to get to the root of that. So we've been doing more work with that too.
Anything else? Okay.
So we'll continue on this path and add to it, working with the staff. The next, what's next after this is really thinking about trauma-informed instruction, trauma-sensitive classrooms, some things that we know we can become better informed about to better support our students and our families. Because I know one thing, I've been doing this a long time, I say all the time, nice lady keeps my hair this color. These aren't the kids we started with 30 plus years ago. It's different, the world is different, our students are different, and I give a lot of credit to everybody who's really working hard. The administrators, the teachers, the school staff, our families, and our kids to try and become those contributing members of society as they grow. So with that, and that notion that behavior, because Mrs. Nair says it all the time, we teach reading, we teach math, we teach everything else. Sometimes we have to teach social emotional learning as well. We took the opportunity because we wanted to share more about what conscious discipline was about at the elementary level. And we asked our colleagues at Cap Region BOCES to create a video for us that we have posted on our website about conscious discipline. But not only have we posted on our website for our local community, but today we got a message from Loving Guidance in Florida, the parent company of Conscious Discipline, asking for the YouTube link to the video we'd like to end with today because it's positive and inspiring, and we are now nationwide. We are on the national website for Conscious Discipline. So I'm going to ask Patty just to...
Could we
Are they giving us a rebate for that?
don't worry, I will get something out of it, yes.
Trade it out. Conscious Discipline is a self-regulation program where we work with the children and the adults, everyone in the building, to learn how to work through their social emotional well-being. We practice breathing techniques through the work that we do to help the children compose. When we are composed, we can react to a situation calmly and safely.
Composure is being calm and in control of oneself. We practice composure by doing different breathing. Breathing helps us to become calm.
When we see a child that's in emotional upset, the response would look something like this. I notice that you're upset. I can tell by your body language that you're not happy right now, but we need to respond safely. So when you want to turn with the blocks, you need to tap someone on the shoulder, say, may I have a turn, please? When the child responds yes, great. If they respond no, we need to practice taking a deep breath. When we need to calm, we do the balloon. Can you show me how to do the balloon? Wonderful.
When we're mad, we can do the drink.
And what does that help you do?
Calm. STAR stands for stop, smile, take a deep breath, and relax. We do pretzel breathing.
How do we do the pretzel breathing? Cross, deep breath in, hold it, and conscious discipline is really looking at misbehavior as missing skills. So when a child is misbehaving, we tend to look at that as the child is missing skills. And so we work to create a culture that helps the children to develop the skill rather than punishing them for not possessing the skill. It's a process, and we take the process very seriously. It's day by day, and we take all of our successes as milestones of growth. We cannot imagine our school family without conscious discipline embedded in it.
To date, 11,507 people have been reached by this video, and it was posted yesterday. What the power is about that and about conscious discipline is it was about the school staff and the school administrator coming together in partnership and saying, we need things to be different in our building. How many years ago now? 2 years ago.
Third year, but second
Third
year
year
of implementation.
So 3 years ago, East Hill staff and their principal came together and said, we know something needs to be different, and this is the journey they've chosen to take. And I think we should all be very excited to see what might be coming up in the future. So we just wanted to share that with you because now we're on a national list. And that's all.
Okay, anything?
I seem to remember that we used to have a Pareto pie chart of types of incidents.
I know, see, I thought about that too.
I would just ask that that gets added with this. I
Yeah.
think that's helpful.
Sure, we can do that.
Anything else? Okay, moving along to Every Student Succeeds Act accountability.
Okay. So what we wanted to provide this evening was information that we learned at a state ed meeting that we attended last week. Mr. Schwabrow and I attended one day. Ms. Ward and Mrs. Schwabrow attended the second day, which was to learn about the Every Student Succeeds Act and New York State accountability under that act. This is a summary. There are more details to come as state ed rolls out the accountability piece. We have seen some of the metrics and the new calculations that they are going to use. What I'm going to tell you is that the things that have stayed the same are still academic achievement and student growth, along with assessments that states are required to do. That includes our prior conversation around 95% participation, that has remained the same, as well as thinking about, about how students' growth changed from year to year. So students should be growing from year to year. The basic construct that 3-8 assessments lead to high school regents exam, lead to graduation, that is still in place. However, there are a couple of things that are different and that are going to be helpful. So I'm going to talk about just a couple of them, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Schwabrow and Ms. Ward to talk about some of the highlighted ones, because those are the new ones. One of the, I think, most exciting things that I see is that graduation rate measurements, although there's always been a bunch of them, for accountability purposes have always rested on a 4-year graduation rate. You enter in 9th grade, you leave in 12th grade. That is not the path. That kind of factory model for students in their education, my humble opinion, is a little bit outdated. It doesn't help meet the needs of every student. In the ESSA accountability for New York State, we are going to be measuring 4-, 5-, and 6-year cohort graduation rates. And I think that's really exciting because it might help some students decide to persist into a 5th year and maybe some others into a 6th year in order to get that high school diploma if their path is going to look a little bit different. One of the precipitating factors that has helped this has been some of the work around the early college high schools and how those students will leave at 4, 5, or 6 years with both their high school diploma and their associate's degree. That has had an impact on how we think about graduation in New York State, along with some other things. So I just think that's really exciting, and because we know for some students, their path is a little different, and they should have the opportunity to do that and still be successful. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
On that same
Yeah.
one, I noticed the high school equivalency piece.
Yes, it's just
Do-
yes.
Do we keep track of each individual and work with them for those 2 years from dropout to try to get through the high school equivalency?
Now, this is new. This is a new thing, so often when a student leaves, we give them all the information as to how to go and sign up for this class, how to access those, prep for it and so on, but we don't know. And so one of the pieces that they're worried about is how are we going to track that? Because at this moment, they can only track if a student takes it through a BOCES program or if it's tied to your school. And so we have a lot of students that might do, there's alternative programs.
They might move and take it in another state.
Exactly. So they, for the time being, can only access those two ways of saying, okay, did a student pass that exam or not?
So in our current practice, do we try to keep track of those people?
We have not, so we're gonna have to develop a way to follow up on that.
One of the pieces that's also different about that graduation rate is that right now, high school equivalency, students who achieve a high school equivalency diploma are counted as non-completers. So that's going to shift.
Right,
So-
I recognize that.
Yeah, they're going to shift to completers now. And so with that, we're going to have to think about how we help support students in those venues.
Right. Thank you.
So I'm going to turn it over to you guys to.
There are a variety of different areas that they are now tracking. So one is academic progress, so they're really looking at how are the students progressing. They have targets for students. They define a target, they look at the students, compare cohorts and so on. So they want to now know how is that student progressing each year on those exams. So that is one thing that they're looking at. Chronic absenteeism is a huge one. This could potentially, this is a tricky one.
Is that all age groups? I'm sorry.
Yes, well, not kindergarten, that's not a school age, but yes.
So it's 1 through 12?
1 through 12. So this is what they're looking at. They are tracking any student that is not in school 10% or more of the school year. That is excused or unexcused. So they will track that data. Right now we have, and we've been implementing this year, and we've actually had a great deal of success, that we have our policy around and procedures around attendance. We take a look every quarter. If a student is at a certain threshold, they either get a letter, they get a call home, they get me at their door, or we call the hotline for anything left. So, but even our numbers are higher than what if we want to be in compliance with this. So the absenteeism is going to be, that's going to be a difficult one. We're making great strides and inroads with it. So I'm not as nervous if we hadn't done that, but that's a big one. College career and civic readiness, they're now tracking as well. And they're measuring that by the type of diplomas that you're getting. So your advanced regents diploma, general diploma, local diploma, and each, there's categories, and then we can explain this further as they flesh this all out, but there, you get points for your district gets points based on how they exit.
one thing that I thought was
Give any
amazing.
points for Life Ready?
Like, no, we don't care, no.
No, that's.
But they factor in, like, okay, if you have an advanced Regents diploma, you get 2 points. If your student has has taken AP courses, that's, 2 points. One thing that I was very excited about in my role in special ed is that they are giving 2 points for those students who graduate with a Regents diploma and the CDOS, that's the Career Development and Occupational Studies credential. So that is considered equally as important as your AP exams and the Advanced Regents diploma. So that's very exciting. And then it goes down from there. So if you have students, older students with disabilities have a local diploma, it might be 1.5 points. If the student just exit with the CDOS credential, that might be 1 point. So that they're tracking that, and so we're looking at amending how we track our data for student graduation every year as to, okay, what's that look like for the student? What is the point system there? Really just so we have a heads up on how it's going to be reported. Ms. Lentz does a fantastic job of making sure that the students are on track and are pushing themselves as much as humanly possible, sometimes to their chagrin. There are going to be 4 potential buckets that we can fall in terms of being identified. Okay, so you can be a recognition school, which means that we're high performing or rapidly improving. So not just a high performing school, but a school that has closed gaps very quickly. That will get you the standing of a recognition school. There's schools in good standing. Then there's targeted support and improvement schools. Those are, when we spoke earlier about our participation rate, that means that one of our subgroup areas or one of these pieces might be low. So they will give us points 1, 2, 3, or 4. If we're in the 1, 2 range, we can become a targeted school, and then we have to write plans for that and submit them to the state. Then the one that you don't want to be on is the comprehensive support and improvement school list. That list is if you are, but definitely for all schools that have a graduation rate below 67%. Lower performing subgroups that have not improved. So for example, if we don't meet the 95% participation rate year after year after year, we automatically will become a comprehensive support and improvement school. Okay, so we have to show the growth. If you have low overall performance for all students in your all students group, then that will also get you on that list. The way the state is figuring this out is they will order every school in the state, so every elementary school, every middle school, every high school, the bottom 10% will be identified. So no matter what, the bottom 10% will be a comprehensive support improvement school. So
No matter what the result is.
doesn't matter.
GE model.
And what
Bottom
is
10
this-
we're always gonna correct.
Yeah. We're gonna make you better.
What is the significance of that? What happens if you
Well,
win that?
They will come in, you might have experienced some of the fund.
It's called the current system of availability.
Yes, but essentially, they'll come in, they will, you'll have people that work with the administration, work with teachers to improve, they set targets, they,
They do random walkthroughs in classrooms, they interview different teams of teachers, administrators, district officials. They go through a huge protocol list in their interview. Some of the things that Canada Harry already does, if
But
you
like
did
somebody
find
else.
yourself on this list, like social emotional learning. If you're a focus school, it's non-negotiable. It's one of the questions, what are you doing to support the social emotional learning of your students? So it's a lengthy process. I know I didn't have to write the actual SEP paperwork last year when I was at Gloversville, Mr. Batty did, but I know the process of filling out the 35 pages of questions or whatever it was took him weeks, and then he had to resubmit certain ones. It is life consuming if you are what is now a focus school, which is becoming.
comprehensive support improvement school, sounds nice.
So just to be clear, if you're under the 95% participation repeatedly without showing improvement, statistical improvement in participation, that will put you in that category, even if you don't have low target groups in results.
Because that's always the first cut. That is staying the same.
So basically, government oversight if we don't meet those
At one point in
requirements.
time in my education career, I was one of those folks to go into schools to help with special education. It's hard for schools, it's a challenge for schools. We're trying to frame it in positive ways. The idea though is if you think about these things and we do some of the things we're talking about around participation, we also have, we'll be watching our subgroup for graduation of students with low socioeconomic status, because that's a subgroup that when we did the graduation rate, that's a concern for us.
Problematic,
Right, you really look at those things and you start to say, okay, what are we doing, what else can we do, and how do we involve lots of people in making those changes that need to happen?
So far, the last time I looked at it, we were above in those categories, but we know we're behind in participation, which is why we already know we're failing at that one. So if
Right.
that's gonna put us in the lowest category, I
Right,
wanna know that, right?
Right, that's something we can fix. Right, immediately
Well,
though-
maybe not.
Well, maybe
because
not.
There's
We-
still an opt-out, right?
Right, well, we could
So-
try, I mean, we
right.
would be obligated to try, and right now, I would say that we would be looking, one of the things they did for us was they ran some of our 16-17 data against the new metrics, and I promise if you want to see it, we will show it to you how the new calculations work and the formulas and all that good stuff as State Ed rolls it out. We are in.
They're complicated. They went
They
through that
are.
on the new board training, and it is complicated.
It is very
crap.
complicated, but it's now even more complicated with the ESSA piece. The target, we might, and I say perhaps because you never know, be in that targeted support and improvement school, which means you're writing a local plan, but you still have to address the areas that you have the need in. So we still would have, that's where we might be. And again, as State Ed rolls more of this out, we will come back with more information because I think that's really important. What we were able to do was to have an overview of where this is going and what's the same and what's going to be different. The government accountability or the accountability piece related to funding is still there. So that's the bottom line. It's gonna look different. And there's going to be some different pieces how we look at things, but it's still there.
I had a couple questions on some of the other topics that you covered. On the chronic absenteeism, I know sometimes when we have people that have illnesses or they had surgery or whatever, we do tutors. Does that still count as an absenteeism? Okay. And then the second thing, I just wanted to confirm, in the student growth and the academic progress, are they tracking by the individual or by the cohort as it increases? Even if the person moved away, then they're out of that, but it's
No, they're
from grade to grade, they're keeping the same?
Yes, they're tracking the data based on by the individual. So they are taking a look, so this obviously doesn't start until fourth grade because you need your third grade scores. And they'll take those scores, they compare, they have what they call a MIP, what was that, measurable interim?
Measures of interim progress.
There you go. That they have formulated by looking at other students with red hair that are 10 and have freckles. And they will then say that that student needs to make this much growth in order to meet their target goal.
So I want to pick on the commentary a little bit. Are they universal standards for all students, or are they different standards for?
They did not get into that, so I'm not
Okay.
exactly sure if they fleshed that out.
Because that could be problematic.
Oh, absolutely,
Right.
and just looking
If
at
they're,
regional.
if there's, yeah, I mean, if I was in inner city, I would be really upset, right? If their standard of growth they're using is some upper class school district somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They did not give us a great deal of information on that.
Anything else?
We'll keep you posted, more to come.
Yeah.
And this document's posted, so it's out there for folks if they need it.
Okay, the next point is AP bubble sheets, which Danielle had raised with her last time.
And Mrs. Lenz organizes the process for AP exams in terms of making sure we get them ordered, collecting the money, and then trying to organize when we can best do the bubble sheets. You know, we've talked about different ways to do it, and I think we did pretty much the same thing last year as this year. She selected days that she could work with the seniors and the juniors. She shared that information with AP teachers. We put it on the announcements and just asked that if those dates didn't work for you, come in and select a different time. So there were kids who had conflicts who worked with her individually to fill it out. It seems a little silly, but the bubble sheets take a good 30 minutes sometimes to do all the stuff, because you have to go through every step and make sure you're filling out the accurate information, that everything's right, because obviously for our students, all of this information goes, they get their tests, they get their scores back, this is how information is communicated to their colleges, so it's really important, and so it's not something you can do before the test, one, because not all kids take all tests, and for us, a lot of our tests this year were in the morning, and so again, you have to allow at least 30 minutes to do it, but you want to make sure it's more in terms of before the start of the test. So in terms of trying to find a time that works, kids can't stay after school with all of their other activities and sports and everything else that's going on, so we try to pick the least disruptive time and then provide kids alternatives if they need it. So like I said, I think Mrs. Lenz probably met with at least 3 students individually to fill it out when their schedule didn't allow them to be at the bigger group event.
How much in advance do we start that process from the AP exams being given?
We leave enough time to, again, make sure. Now, we don't get all of the paperwork until closer to the exam, so we have to submit everything to them. Then we get the paperwork, obviously, the exams and all of that have to be locked up, and then the answer booklets. So we usually try to do it at least the week before we start. And again, sometimes it's given on when do they arrive, and there's not always a set date of oh, we're definitely gonna have it by this day.
So it's usually a week or a little bit more, it's not like the day before
No,
or something
no.
like that?
Danielle, do you have any thoughts on this process?
Just my main concern was I was told that the next day that I wanted to come in, I was going to come in the day that the juniors were filling in their sheets, and I was told the day would be full, there wouldn't be enough room. So, but I went anyway, and it wasn't full. So, and other students have that same concern who were in that computer science internship class. So that was just my concern, because if things were gonna be full, maybe we needed more days to, fill out these bubble sheets.
And it turned out there was space available.
Yeah, there's space available, so.
So two things that might be helpful. One, we were considering, one thought is when we have, next year, even before we get the one-to-one devices, we're going to be going to a Gmail platform so students can have Gmail accounts to interact. So we talked about using a Google Calendar and providing some more spaces, using more of a sign-up kind of opportunity, because we'll have the access to do that. And that would give some more opportunity, or at least some flexibility. Because even, because even sometimes when things are full, and I'm glad Daniel went anyway, sometimes people don't show up, or people forget, that kind of thing. So it would just allow some additional flexibility using a technology tool that we're gonna have. So we're gonna try and look at having technology help us.
And then Mrs. Lenz ends up chasing individuals, whereas if we said, here are some dates, and you sign up on the date that makes the most sense for you, then that's your date and you're picking it, and if it's on the Google Calendar, then they can see it, they can even see who else is signing up. So it might, again, give kids some options, but also sort of put the onus on them. You pick the date that works for you, but then you gotta make it happen.
And next year, we're paying for the exams, so that'll be one less thing off
Right.
of Mrs.
Right.
Lenz trying to hunt people down for.
Because she always sets it prior to when the money actually has to be due,
Right.
but then we're still, it's never all set by that time. So yes, so that would be,
That'll give
that would
her a
be a
little
time
bit more
saver.
time.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Anything else?
How many kids are taking AP exams? And this is for, I'm assuming, all the subject areas, the total sheets?
I sent the thing to you, I don't
I
have the
think
number in my brain.
for some reason, 84 is the number that's topping. It's
Oh.
aggregate, that's all students,
Yeah.
and some of those might be students taking duplicate or multiple AP exams.
Yeah, sometimes we do it by test, how many tests were given.
Yeah,
Yeah, so 80,
I
I
can
believe is 84.
I have it in my Google Drive.
and we get the bubble sheets about a week before the exams, or is it?
Again, I'm gonna say, I don't wanna be held to a date
Yeah.
because
No,
there's
no.
so many factors, especially when
Yeah.
you're shipping them.
We were just trying to get an
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
That's all.
And so Danielle, when you were saying you know, it was full, is that, if I'm understanding correctly, that's when the time to fill in the bubble sheets, like there was only 10 or 20 people allowed to come to a certain room, or what does that mean?
Well, how it went this year was there was a day for the seniors to fill out their bubble sheets and a day for the juniors, and I just said I was just gonna go to the juniors day because I couldn't go on the seniors day, and then I was told that day would like have too many people, so.
I'd be curious to know how they used to do it, you know, and how it worked before.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't know either. I don't.
Well, how they used to do it? They used to just do it on the first day of tests. So you came in to take the first day, people filled in those bubble sheets, and then the next group, because juniors would do it for one test, and seniors would do it for the other. So you just have it, the biggest one is always the first one. So there's always the practice exams, you do it on the day of the practice exam. You start 30 minutes early.
Okay. Yeah, that's it.
So students got up earlier back then.
Well, some of them are, yeah, they're in school already, so you just start. And it's on the practice day, so you're already sitting for the test, so you're already there. You just start 30 minutes early.
Okay, anything else?
That's an idea.
That might be something also to consider as a backup behind Google. You know, for anyone who didn't make their date that's on their calendar and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so I would have a motion to go into exec.
Make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask Stacy and Chris to all stay. So we have